Why not start the day with remembering who you want to be when you open your eyes? Remember that vision, and then begin to teach your body emotionally what that future feels like before it happens. But when you change the way you think and feel, and it starts to produce effects in your outer world, now you start to realize you're the creator of your life. And the moment you start seeing feedback in your life, you're going to pay attention to what you did and you're going to do it again.
I think most people don't even know that they feel guilty. They don't even know that they feel unworthy. They don't even know that they feel depressed or feel victimized, because 95% of who we are by the time we're 35 years old is a set of memorized behaviors pretty much on autopilot.
The signal that you're creating is going to either work in a constructive way or in a destructive way. The measurements that we've recorded prove without a doubt that people are beginning to understand what it is to be the creator of their lives. And if you can give people sound scientific information, and I believe that science is the contemporary language of mysticism. Science is what demystifies the mystical. And then if they have the ability to really understand it and then turn to the person next to them and explain it, by them explaining that model of understanding, they're beginning to install the neurological hardware in their brain in preparation for an experience. In other words, the more you understand what you're doing and why you're doing it, the how gets easier.
Yep.
If you can't explain it, then it's not wired in your brain. So as you learn new things, you make new connections in your brain. As you begin to repeat it and think about it, those nerve cells that fire together begin to wire together. And if learning is making new connections, then remembering is maintaining those connections. So as people begin to explain this model of understanding, they're really putting in the circuits in place to prepare them for an experience. If you give them the proper instruction and you set up the conditions in the environment where they feel safe enough to create, a certain percentage of those people will get their behaviors to match their intentions and their actions equal to their thoughts. When they do, there's going to be some type of transformation. So we've been measuring that transformation and interpreting it. And the more we interpret that transformation, the more information we've gained to be able to teach transformation again the next time. So we've been able to close the gap between knowledge and experience. So the last 6 years or so, all the measurements that we've gathered, we've made scientific history over and over again. And you don't have to be a monk or an academic or a scholar or a nun or a rabbi. All you have to do is just understand the formula. So we were doing these week-long, these events, that were 4 days, 4.5 days. And I realized that right around that Saturday or Sunday when the event was ending, people started having some really profound experiences. So I thought, well, heck, what if we extended the workshops 3 or 4 more days and give them the opportunity to spend the whole week and immerse themselves deeper into the experience? And I have to tell you, we've done 5 or 6 week-long events now, and the miraculous of biblical proportion is starting to happen right before our eyes. And I'm talking about not just somebody's shoulder pain going away or their insomnia getting somewhat better. I'm not talking about small changes in well-being. I'm talking about people that were born with 5% vision, that never saw a face, that never saw colors or details, get their vision back. I'm talking about people who were deaf, that had hearing aids or had no ability to hear out of one ear or both ears, now hearing again. People with tumors on their thyroid, tumors on their body, in 1 week shrinking and disappearing. People with crutches or people even in wheelchairs. We've seen those people break out of their patterns and really begin to live a very different life. And so I have to tell you, Michael, that I think I'm more surprised than anybody, because we're witnessing that right before our very eyes. And I think that when you really begin to experience it, or at least witness it or observe it, you can't go back to being the same person again. It changes you on a very deep level. And I think this is a time in history where it's not enough to know. I think it's a time in history to know how. And all of a sudden you're seeing, just like an infection spreads amongst the community and creates disease, I'm starting to see how health and wellness can be as infectious as disease. And And it's so emotional, and it's so incredible. It's so beautiful. Yeah.
Which is, we're starting to move more like the birds, more like the fish, and we're hitting some sort of, maybe you can tell us about this, incredibly positive critical mass.
Sure, I think we're living in a time of extreme polarities. I think that things have to be pulled apart. Polarity, if you look at even studies in chaos theory, that there always has to be extreme polarities before there's a reorganization. Mm-hmm. And everything that is not consistent with a new level of energy or new level of consciousness is going to spiral apart. So think about it. Every system in nature, before it evolves, goes through a period of chaos. It's just the way it is. And so information is what is causing this whole thing to accelerate, because you don't need an authority any longer to gain information. You don't need a priest or a rabbi or a teacher. You don't need a doctor to gain information, because of technology. Information is so accessible. So every time you learn knowledge, you become more conscious of the way things really are. And if you become more aware and you become more conscious, you can't have consciousness without energy. So there's an elevation globally of energy taking place. In fact, if I think back 5 years ago or 10 years ago, and I walked out in front of an audience and I had to work to get an audience to a certain level of understanding, those days are over and we'll never go back to that again. Everybody is informed. So that greater level of energy, that greater level of consciousness is causing old systems and old paradigms to begin to spiral out. And so whether you're looking at the environment, politics, economics, religion, education, journalism, medicine, all of those paradigms are beginning to unravel because they're no longer consistent with a greater level of energy. So how then do we face these challenges is the big question, because if we face them in fear, then it's the very emotion and energy of fear that created them in the first place. If we face them with hostility and anger, well, we are going to be reacting and recreating the same outcome. So we have to embrace this understanding, not as in a separate way of like, you're over there and I'm over here, because that's the lie that we've been told, that separation is the way things really are. And in fact, in the quantum, everything is connected by an invisible field of energy, everything material, in fact. So then how do you unify everything material? And it's that elevated emotion called love or gratitude. So then when we begin to come from that level of consciousness, we experience less separation. In fact, our heart begins to open, our field around our body begins to expand, and that field around the body that begins to expand actually touches every other thing that's material from an immaterial place. That means then, when you're feeling love for yourself, or love for life, or love for the moment, every single person that you have a relationship with, if your signal is the strongest, will begin to affect their autonomic nervous system. We know this to be the truth because we've measured this over and over again. We can take a group of 750 people and put them in a room, and we can have 50 people in the front of the room wearing heart rate monitors. Now, it turns out, as you know the heart math team over there, Howard Martin, Roland, and Debbie, and all those guys, that when you're frustrated, when you're impatient, when you're resentful, your heart actually beats very, very incoherently. It beats out of order. That's because you're stepping on the gas and the brake at the same time. The survival systems are switching on, the stress hormones are being released, but you're not running, you're not fighting, and you're not hiding. So there's a conflict between the accelerator and the brake, and that's what causes the heart to beat arrhythmically. So then when you switch from those limited emotions to elevated emotions, then you start feeling love and gratitude. All of a sudden, you begin to produce a very coherent magnetic field around your body. That energy is frequency, and all frequency carries information. So if you have 750 people in the room, and you have 50 people in the front of the room wearing the heart rate monitor, and you teach people how to elevate their energy and to open their heart and create coherence, and then lay the thought for the greatest good of everybody sitting in the front of the room, that their lives be enriched, that their bodies be healed, that their dreams come true, that the mystical find them. When you see the majority of those people wearing the heart rate monitors all go into heart coherence at the exact same time, in the exact same day, on the exact same meditation, you have to scratch your head and realize that there is no separation. In fact, it is that energy that binds all of us. So now, how do you change the world then is the next question, because if you're seeing those non-local changes, then those people that are feeling heart coherence, every person they're in a relationship with, that they are networked with, to some measure or some degree, will have an effect on their autonomic nervous system. Well, they'll feel more coherent or more loving in that moment. So then if you get a group of people all doing this around the world, and HeartMath has done great research on Project Coherence to show that, in effect, that it can happen on opposite sides of the world, you get enough people doing that, you start seeing everybody coming from the place of love. Now, what does that do? Something emerges. A new species, a new consciousness emerges, where we're all acting as one mind. The beauty behind those birds and those fish is when you look at them, they look at like one organism. They look like a bigger organism than they really are. The individuals are making up the whole, but they're connected and they're acting as one mind. So then the antithesis is also true. The way you control people and cause them to believe that they're separate is to create the stress hormones, because when stress hormones are released, the opposite happens. You contract. The energy of field around your body is being used. The vital life force is being used and turned into chemistry, and the field around your body shrinks. Now you feel more like matter and less like energy, more like particle and less like wave. The very hormones of stress really endorse our senses, and we become materialists. So if we can't see it or smell it or hear it or taste it or feel it, it doesn't exist. And those chemicals then cause us to feel separation, because our senses fool us into believing you're over there and I'm over here. I'm over here and my dreams are way over there, and I have to drag my body through space to get to my future, and it's going to take time. So our dreams are way out away from us, and it's going to take time for us to get to them. So now, get a community of people together that are all resonating at that frequency, you start to see dramatic changes that will begin to take place in crime rates, in violence, in economic growth as a result of a new energy. Now, but here's the deal. If you measure those changes when, say, in a peace gathering project where thousands of people are focusing on peace, and you start seeing changes in crime and violence and everything else, when those peace gathering projects end, violence and crime return back to the same level again. So it's not enough to just think it. We have to live it. We have to live that prayer every single day. We have to demonstrate peace. We have to embody it. We have to do it with our eyes open. We have to demonstrate it so that we give others permission to do the same. And so then the question is, then how do you become supernatural? Well, you have to first start doing what feels unnatural. Mm-hmm. That means when everybody else is in fear, that's when you show courage. When everybody else is hostile and angry, that's the time to show love and compassion. When everybody else is in lack and poverty, that's the time to give. And I think that gives people permission to do the same, because of mirror neurons. We want to emulate that behavior, and it counts the most in those moments. It doesn't count when everything is comfortable and okay. It counts the most when you should be doing something else. And if you're able to go against those years, thousands of years of genetic programming hardwired into our survival centers, all of a sudden other people will begin to do the same, and you will see an emergence of a new consciousness.
We are affecting the field as much as the field is affecting us. So not only are we getting downloads, but we can project into the field and make mass change based on what we're projecting.
Right. Now, there's some conditions on that. There, you can create a field that is very dissonant, very incoherent, static, that's not a clear signal. So the effects that you produce in sending that information have less effects on the nature of reality than when your brain and heart are coherent. So when your brain is coherent, all the compartments that usually are subdivided are resonating in some type of harmony and some type of order. When your heart is coherent, the rhythm of the heart is producing that measurable field. So in order for you to affect matter, you have to combine a clear intention, a coherent brain, with an elevated emotion, heart-centered feeling. This is the center of oneness. This is the center of wholeness. This is where our divinity starts. This is the union of polarity, the union of opposites. This is where it all comes together. And when
In
you
the heart.
get it, and when you get that energy right here, it happens, and we've measured this. Once it's here, it's going to go all the way to the brain. It's going to act as an amplifier to amplify the brain. And when the brain starts to get super coherent, then it has very direct effects on the heart. So what's the relevance behind that? Well, once again, the signal that you're creating on a daily basis is going to either work in a constructive way or in a destructive way. And as an example, if you're walking around feeling sorry for yourself and suffering and feeling victimized, then you're actually emanating that signal into the field. And what you're saying is, bring me an experience equal to my suffering, but bring it in a way that I least expect, that surprises me and leaves no doubt that I've created this outcome. So in a sense, we're not punished for our sins, we're punished by our sins. And sin is an attitude. So then the opposite is also true. When you teach people how to connect to the energy of a future dream and be defined by a vision of the future instead of the memories of the past, to believe in their future more than they believe in their past, to fall in love with their future more than they fall in love with their past, and be able to combine that clear intention of that future and begin to feel the emotions of that future before it's made manifest. They're broadcasting a whole new signature into the field. Now, the beauty behind that is that the longer you're conscious of that energy, the more you're drawing that future to you, which also means then the moment you get in your car and start getting angry and getting frustrated because you're in traffic, now you just disconnected from the energy of your future, and now you're back to the energy of your past. And those survival emotions exert less effects on the nature of reality. So now you feel like matter trying to change matter. You're separate, and so you force it, you control it, you try harder, you wish, you pray, you hope. I mean, hope is a beggar. We do everything, compete to try to manipulate and make it happen because we have limited resources then. So then when a person's able to sustain or maintain that modified state of mind and being, then the fun starts to happen because you start seeing those synchronicities. You start seeing those coincidences, those opportunities, those unknowns, those things start falling out of nowhere because you are connected to that field of information. And not only are you connected to it, but you're also beginning to influence it. So then more and more people are creating now, and less people are experiencing the state of being called being a victim. So then if you're a victim, then you would say, I was angry because of traffic. Well, then I would say to you, well, you mean your outer world was controlling how you think and feel. Some circumstance, some person, something in your outer world is actually controlling your feelings and thoughts. That means you're a victim to those circumstances. But when you change the way you think and feel, and it starts to produce effects in your outer world, now you start to realize you're the creator of your life. And the moment you start seeing feedback in your life, you're going to pay attention to what you did and you're going to do it again. And now you're going to believe now you're more of the creator of your life and less of the victim of your life.
Thank you. So let's go to how do we start to change the way we think and feel to put ourselves more in the creator role rather than the victim role?
Well, this is the beauty behind, as you said earlier, living in this day and age. I mean, more and more people are waking up. I mean, more and more people are really beginning to realize that nobody is so special to be excluded from this phenomenon. And we all have the same biology. We come with all the neurological and biological machinery to do this. And we all have done it. We've all said, what would it be like to have my own show? What would it be like to be wealthy, to be healthy, to be free, to be in a new relationship, to have a family, to have a mystical experience? And the moment we ask that question, we turn on the creative center in our brain, the frontal lobe. That's the boss. That's the CEO. That's the symphony leader. And it has connections to the entire brain. And one thing it wants to do is answer the question. So what does it do? It looks out into the landscape of the brain and see what's stored in there. Things we've learned intellectually and things we've experienced that's related to the question. And it begins to activate those circuits. The frontal lobe calls them up. And then those circuits start to fire in tandem. And when they start to resonate and fire in tandem, we get a picture in our mind. That's called intention. We're selecting a new potential in the quantum field. Now, the passionate person who's fully engaged in looking at that future, observing that future, the thought in their mind literally becomes the experience. Now, the end product of an experience is called an emotion. And all of a sudden, the person starts to feel the emotion of the event before it's made manifest. And now, how you think and how you feel creates your state of being. So in a sense, they're changing their state of being. Now, the stronger the emotion that they feel, the more altered they are inside of them, the more they'll pay attention to the picture in their mind. And now they're creating a long-term memory. In other words, they're remembering their future. Now, you can't just do that once and then get up and expect your bank account to be filled. That's not how it works. Or you to be selected to go to the moon. That's not how it works. You have to be able to maintain that modified state of mind and body, independent of any condition in your external environment, independent of the emotions or habits or hardwired attitudes that are subconscious programs that are stored in the body, and independent of time. And if you can, you will start to see those unusual events beginning to occur in your life. So then you become the scientist in your life. And so it takes training to teach people how to get beyond their past. And we know this because we've done enough workshops to know that the hardest part of a workshop that we do is the first day or two, because people are coming, they're emotional, they're got problems, they're got a lot of questions, they're overly analytical, they're stuck.
How do we take this, in a sense, the term that just came to mind, because you said we're generating, is we're becoming generators. How do we use this to help each other?
Well, look, I mean, people think they think it's about their wealth or their health or their freedom or their new relationship or their new job. It's none of that. It's about who you become in the process. So you overcome your fear, you overcome your doubt, you overcome your unworthiness, you overcome your pain, you overcome your past. You keep overcoming, you keep overcoming, you keep overcoming. You're going to become somebody else. And once you become wealth, I mean, nobody creates wealth. You generate wealth. It's an energy. You generate freedom. You generate all those things. You are the generator of it. So then I love this because people are so conditioned, me included, for many years, that we have to drag our bodies through space to get what we want, right? That's living in the world of separation, matter trying to change matter. And so the more I'm living by those survival emotions, the more it's going to take me time to get my dreams to come true. But in the quantum, if you're creating from the field instead of from matter, Einstein said the field is the sole governing agency of the particle. He didn't say the particle controls the particle, the field controls the particle. So if you're creating from the field instead of from the particle, when there's a vibrational match with your energy, and even Einstein said this, it's all vibration. When there's a vibrational match with your energy and some potential in the quantum field, you don't have to go anywhere to get it. In fact, you are going to collapse space and time, and the event is going to be drawn to you. Now you don't go anywhere to get it. You are calling experiences to you. So then the final point is that, well, then you got to take responsibility for every area of your life, even the stuff that isn't working, because the stuff that isn't working, you got to change your energy then equal to something greater. And so then people will say, well, yeah, but you understand this person did it to me. And I would say, right, but if you keep reacting, you're going to create another one of those. So then what do you have to do? You have to get beyond the memories of our past and fall in love with the future over and over again, so that all of a sudden you're believing in that future more than you're believing in the past. And the brain and body, if we do it properly, will look like the future has already happened. Now you don't have to do anything. It's going to come to you. When we started out on the journey in measuring brain waves and brain scans and heart coherence and heart rate monitors and measuring epigenetic changes and protein expression and neurotransmitters on students that came to our event, and then they went through 4 days of training to change, we never really anticipated at the end of 4 days that we would be seeing the type of changes that we were seeing in common people. And it is supernatural that someone is able to heal in a weekend. It is supernatural that a person is sustaining internal states, levels of order independent of the conditions in their outer world. It is really supernatural that people are signaling genes in a very short amount of time and regulating proteins as a result of it, and making their brain work in a more efficient and more profoundly healthy way. And the amount of energy that we're seeing and recording in the brain has just never really been recorded in the history of neuroscience. So we have data to prove that common people, just like you and I, once they understand what they're doing and why they're doing it, the how gets easier. And so the book is just a labor of love for me, because it's something that I feel really deeply about, and I'm stepping outside of the scientific realm and bridging the spiritual realm and the mystical along with the scientific, and it's something that I've always wanted to do.
First off, the thought that comes up, we don't need to go there, but I think of Salvador Dali and this melted timepiece, because he used to go into the hypnagogic state to draw and would pull concepts of time, which is maybe he was getting just the glimpse of what you started to get there. Maybe where we should go is your understanding of time, I think, has been radically altered. And you say that we have to master the concept of the present moment. What does that mean?
Well, there's so much talk about the present moment and being present in the power of now, but most people, they spend the majority of their life, 95% of the time, either living by some past emotion or some past habit, or anticipating the future based on the past. And so we're very rarely in the present moment. And paying attention is being present. And it's a skill, just like anything else. The more you practice it, the better you get at it. So think about it. If feelings and emotions are the end product of past experiences, and you can remember experiences better because you can remember how they feel. If you wake up in the morning and you have to search for the familiar feeling called you every morning, and that feeling is unhappiness or frustration or lack or insecurity or fear, the moment you get in touch with that emotion, you're starting your day from the past, because the emotion is a record of the past. Now, if that emotion is connected to memories that are mapped neurologically in your brain of certain people at certain places at certain times with certain things, then the moment you feel that emotion, you associate that emotion with the past memory, then you're activating circuits in your brain from the past. So if how you think and how you feel creates your state of being, and thoughts are the vocabulary of the brain, and feelings are the vocabulary of your body, then your entire state of being is in the past. And most people are living in the past. So their body is their unconscious mind, and it doesn't know the difference between an experience in their life that creates an emotion and an emotion that they're creating by thought alone. To the body, it's exactly the same. So those emotions start driving people's thoughts. And if they can't think greater than how they feel, and feelings have become the means of thinking, and they believe that their thoughts have something to do with their destiny, then they're thinking in the past. So they're creating more of the same life. And by the same means, if they wake up in the morning and they come back to their senses and they start out with the same routine that they did yesterday, and they're going through a series of routine habits of going to the toilet, making coffee, eating breakfast, taking a shower, driving to work the same way, then we could say, for the most part, a person's future is nothing more than a replication of the past, and they're not in the present moment. And if they keep doing that over and over again, that becomes a habit. And a habit is a redundant set of automatic, unconscious thoughts, behaviors, and emotions that's acquired through frequent repetition. A habit is when you've done something so many times, the body has become the mind. So for most people, their body is dragging them into a predictable future, and they're on autopilot based on what they've done in the past, and they've lost their free will to a program. So then teaching people then how to keep their attention in the present moment and take their attention off their body, take their attention off of people in their life, take their attention off of things they own or objects they possess, places they have to go, and even time itself. is the act of becoming pure consciousness, and that's when we begin to disengage from the emotions of the body in the past and the habituations of the body living in the future based on the past. And so that process, then, think about it. The stronger the emotion you have, the more you pay attention to what you think is causing it. So if you feel fear, and in antiquity, if you're being chased by a predator, the moment you feel fear, you're thinking about that predator because you're going to keep it on your mind. So now what if it's not a predator, but what if it's your coworker? What if it's your boss? What if it's your ex? And the stronger the emotion you feel for those people, the more you're keeping your mind and your attention on them. So then if where you place your attention is where you place your energy, then you're giving your power away to that person or that thing. And if you got a lot of those things and objects and people, and your attention is shifting from one person to another problem to another thing, we could say then that your attention and your energy is divided. And you don't really have any energy for healing, any energy to create a new life, any energy for a mystical moment. So then breaking that association and being in the present moment requires you becoming conscious of when you're feeling guilty or feeling insecure. And the moment you start noticing it, you settle your body back down into the present moment, relax, and turn back up into that unlimited field of possibilities. And the moment you start noticing, thinking about how long have I gone, how much time is this going to go, what do I have to do today, who do I have to see, what meeting do I have, that the act of putting your attention in the predictable future based on what you did in the past and returning back to the present moment is disinvesting your energy out of the known and making room for the unknown in your life. And just like training an animal, Michael, the more you do this, the more you're able to settle down the brain and the body into the present moment. And now you're building your own electromagnetic field as you break the bonds energetically with everyone and everything in your life, and you keep your attention off the person that you think is causing that emotional reaction. Then you're disinvesting your energy out of your past, present reality, and now you have the available energy to begin to change. And we've measured this, and people's energy fields get more broadened, their brain becomes more coherent, their heart becomes more coherent, they have significant changes in their health, just as a result of finding the sweet spot of the generous present moment.
What do you think is up with the fabric of the universe that it's designed that the more we come together and the more we get in coherence, the more we can do?
Yeah, I mean, look, the quantum field is an invisible field of information that exists beyond space and time. There's no people there, there's no bodies there, there's no objects, there's no things, there's no place, and there's not even time. So if you take away all the people, all the bodies, all the things, all the objects, you take away the planets, you take away the moons, you take away the stars, the light from the stars, you take away the galaxies, you take away everything, you're left with a big black space. And that happens to be a field that's rich in frequency and information that we can't perceive with our senses. We can only perceive with our awareness. So as people have the instruction and the proper information, and they begin to strive to put their attention on it, to tune into it, to experience it, to stay present with it moment after moment after moment, every time they begin to pick up more of its subtleties, the experience literally creates the circuits in their brain, because that's what experience does, which means the next time they look for it, they have the circuits in place to perceive it. And if you keep doing this over and over again, you start wiring your brain for the divine. So as people start to connect to that unified field is the energy that governs all the laws of nature, that brings everything into order. So as you connect to it more and more, then you experience more wholeness and more oneness and less separation. So if you experience less separation, then there's less separation between you and your dreams as well. There's less separation between you and the person that's sitting next to you. You experience more oneness. And so as you unfold deeper into that field, you can produce greater effects on the nature of reality because you're moving closer to its origins. So we experience separation when we feel fear. We experience separation when we feel anger and aggression. We experience separation when we feel pain and suffering, because the very chemicals cause us to perceive reality with our senses. And then, of course, if I'm perceiving reality with my senses, there's me here and there's you there. And there's me here and there's my dreams over there. But as we connect to it more and more, as we get closer and closer to it and we experience more of it, then we should be able to produce a greater effect on the nature of reality, because we're more connected to the very field of information that really organizes matter into form. So we're climbing upstream to be able to produce an effect downstream.
Woohoo! On top of meditation, and by God, I've got to get to one of your events. We'll talk about your events coming up in a minute. What can we do on a moment-by-moment basis when we catch ourselves and realize we're riding our emotions?
Look, I mean, there's nothing wrong with an emotional reaction. I still have them. I mean, we all do. The question is, how long are you going to have it? That's the real question. And if you can't break that emotional reaction, then it means on some level you must be addicted to that emotion, because an addiction is something you think you can't stop. So imagine then, when you start reacting, most people don't think that they have the ability to stop it, so they don't. They think the person out there is doing it to me, or that situation is creating it. So once we say that, we're victims because we have no control over ourselves. So when we start reacting, the first thing to do is to stop, take a breath, center yourself, bring up an elevated emotion. And I know that a lot of times you don't want to do it because you want to feel angry and you want to feel frustrated and you want to feel fear, because that's the normal reaction. So the first step in any process of change is becoming aware. So you may just say, my gosh, now I'm aware that I'm angry. Now that I'm aware that I'm fearful, that's the first step. The second step is doing something about it. Taking a moment, excusing yourself from the conditions in your life just for a few minutes, centering yourself. I just did it yesterday. Centering myself, taking a couple breaths, raising my energy, and working with my body. So I don't do that for 4 hours, because it turns out we lose a lot of energy, and we also start downregulating genes that start creating disease. So the second step is really executing a change by creating an elevated state. And so you begin to lower the volume to those survival emotions, and of course you begin to cultivate elevated emotions. And it makes sense that our students who practice this every single day in doing the inner work, it's becoming a skill for them. And we see some students that are able to sustain those states for over an hour at a time, which means they don't have all their attention on their outer world now. They're actually paying more attention to their inner world, and they're not putting all their attention out there. And that's what allows them to catch it when they start feeling a certain way. So you got to practice, just like you just can't go out and hit a tennis ball unless you start practicing. And the more you practice and the more you do the work, the same thing happens with your ability to be able to regulate and change different states. I think that most people spend the majority of their life living by the memories of the past, and instead of being defined by a vision of the future. I think most people believe in their past more than they believe in their future. I think people are more in love with their past than they are more in love with their future. And they certainly tell the story of their past more than they tell the story of their future. And it's so much easier to forget our vision than to remember it. So why not start the day with remembering who you want to be when you open your eyes? Remember that vision, and then begin to teach your body emotionally what that future feels like before it happens. Now, that kind of goes against how we've been conditioned. We need to get something in order to feel gratitude. Well, what if your whole life you're not creating and you're not, and then nothing's changing? Well, that means you're living in emptiness and lack your whole entire life. So imagine if you finish a meditation and you get up feeling grateful, then you feel like you already have what you've created, and you have less lack or separation. You feel more whole, and so you're less likely to force outcomes and control outcomes in your life because you feel like it's already happened. So starting your day by changing your brain neurologically and neurochemically, and changing your body chemically and genetically to live in the future present instead of the past present, and be able to maintain that modified state of mind and body your entire day. Just get ready, because if you're able to do that, you'll start seeing synchronicities and opportunities, and and serendipities and coincidences happening in your life, because that's the side effect of a change in energy. It's a side effect of changing our state of being.
Woohoo! If I was to take off my coaching hat and put it on you, Dr. Joe, and you gave people one assignment to take action on today, what would it be?
Well, I think probably the first thing I would have people do is to really decide what they want in their life. I mean, that's the first step. Decide what your future could look like, and get clear on what that vision is, and write down the specifics of what you want in your life, whether it's with your family or your career or with a relationship or whatever it is, and get clear on what that vision is of yourself in the future. And then write down the emotions of how you'll feel when it happens. Will you be joyful? Will you be enthusiastic? Will you be filled with energy? Will you love your life and be in a constant state of gratitude? And now you have a clear intention and elevated emotion. And every morning when you start your day, before you open your eyes and reach for your cell phone and check your WhatsApp and your texts and your Facebook and your Twitter and your Instagram and your LinkedIn and your emails, before you plug yourself back into your same familiar world, sit there and get very clear on what that future will be like and begin to emotionally embrace it before it happens. And if you do that properly, you're moving into a new state of being. And then at certain points in your day, just break and ask yourself how you're doing. How am I doing? Am I doing well? Am I losing it? Am I falling from grace? And then recalibrate. And at the end of your day, ask yourself how you did. And if you keep changing your state of being over and over again, your state of being is your personality, and your personality creates your personal reality. And when you start seeing those changes in your life and those synchronicities, the energy and the excitement of the surprise of that event is going to inspire you to create again. And I think that's how we move from victims in our lives to creators of our lives.
I love it. I think it's made a big difference. It's kind of, I want to go from there, and when we're going to swing back to a lot of the things that you just covered right there. There's an irony. You asked me at the beginning, how am I doing? And I said something to the effect of, oh, good, or, well, I'll explain more on the show. This weekend, I was actually really, really ill with food poisoning. And so ill that I'm going, do I have this interview today or not? And I said to myself, I said, particularly with the book, You Are the Placebo, you are going to be fine in time for this interview. And so maybe a great way to dive in here is, what is wrong with our current view of healing?
Well, I think that most people have been hypnotized and conditioned that they need something outside of them to make some change inside of them. And, you take a pill, and the pill makes your headache go away, or takes your pain away, or makes you feel better, or dries up your mucus, and you take that pill again, it does the same thing. And the pill represents some type of chemical change over time, that you can substitute that pill with another pill that looks like that pill, and body's conditioned to produce the same exact chemicals from past experiencing. Conditioning is based on the past. But when they take the pill, then they begin to expect an outcome. And as they begin to expect an outcome, they begin to anticipate some future reality based on the past. And expectation, for the most part, is based on the future. So you have conditioning based on the past, expectation based on the future. And if you assign meaning to what it is, you say, hey, this pill will dry up your snot, or make your stomach stop hurting, or make your pain go away, and you have a picture and they show you diagrams of what it does, you'll begin to assign meaning to it, because you'll say that's exactly what this pill is going to do. So you have an intention behind it. Well, when you combine all three of those things, you begin to condition people to expect, by them understanding what they're doing, that they can begin to produce an effect without anything outside of them. So can you take away the sugar pill or the saline injection and teach people how to do the exact same thing? And instead of relying on something external from them, they begin to rely on the innate capacities of the body to heal itself. And I'm happy to say that it's actually teachable.
In a strange way, this sounds like law of attraction with a pill, and then taking away that pill.
Well, I think the law of attraction has been pretty much overutilized, but let's think about it like this. I mean, let's ask the question. I mean, how can you give someone a sugar pill or a saline injection, or perform some false surgery or procedure? And a certain percentage of those people will accept, believe, and surrender to the thought that they're getting the actual substance or treatment. And they begin to program their autonomic nervous system to make their own pharmacy of chemicals that matches the exact same chemical they think they're taking. So the question is the inert substance that's doing the healing, or is it the thought that's doing the healing? So then that pill is a symbol, and that symbol represents a new potential in the quantum field called getting healthy. If the doctor's enthusiastic and they tell them what the pill does, and the person's in the right state of mind, the person will begin to feel hopeful and inspired and start to feel gratitude and joy and start to feel free and start to feel better. And when you combine a clear intention with an elevated emotion, you begin to change a person's biology from moving into the past to moving into the future. So
let me pause you to repeat that one more time. A clear intention with a positive emotion.
An elevated emotion. An elevated emotion, a heart-centered emotion like gratitude or thankfulness or appreciation or love or joy or inspiration or empowerment. And it's that combination of a clear intention, was an act of a mind, an elevated emotion, which is the language or the vocabulary of the body, that begins to change a person's state of being, because thoughts are the language of the brain and feelings are the language of the body, and how you think and how you feel creates a state of being. So most people, their brain is organized to reflect everything they know in their life. Their brain is a record of the past. It's an artifact. So then most people think in the past, and feelings and emotions are the end product of past experiences. So if you're feeling the same way every single day, it means nothing new is happening in your life. And if those feelings are driving your thoughts, then you're thinking in the past. So most people's biology is, for the most part, living in the past. So then when you begin to combine that clear intention with an elevated emotion, a person can begin to move their biology from living in the past to living in the future. Here's an example. 81% of people that are in a depression study that are given a placebo, 81% of those people respond as well as the people that are given the drug, which means they're making their own pharmacy of antidepressants. Their brain is the greatest pharmacist there ever was, and their brain already knows how to make those chemicals because there's receptor sites in the brain that receive those chemicals. So then the problem is that most people do it once or twice and they give up. But I mean, even the depression studies, those studies went on for 6 to 8 weeks, and every day they were reconditioning their body to a new mind and beginning to select a new potential and change their brain. So then it may take 6 to 8 weeks for people to begin to change their own state of being and begin to make their own balance in their body. And we've seen it happen over and over again.
How do we begin to change our emotional state?
Well, I think the first step is knowledge, Michael. I think most people don't even know that they feel guilty. They don't even know that they feel unworthy. They don't even know that they feel depressed or feel victimized, because 95% of who we are by the time we're 35 years old is a set of memorized behaviors and emotional reactions, beliefs, perceptions, subconscious. Yeah, pretty much on autopilot. That's 95% of most people. So their 5% is working against 95% of what they've memorized subconsciously. So the first step then is becoming conscious of your unconscious thoughts, becoming aware of your automatic behaviors, and then noticing and paying attention to the emotions that you feel every day. And as you begin to observe those states of mind and body, it means you're no longer the program. Now you're the consciousness observing the program, and you begin to objectify your subjective self. You begin to pull out of your biology. So awareness then is the first step. So then most people, once they become conscious that they're living by certain emotions, the next question are, what are those emotions? And those emotions typically are connected to some past experience. Like, I'm this way because I got fired from my job 10 years ago. I am this way because my husband left me with 3 children. I am this way because I was in a serious accident 15 years ago. I am this way because I had this event happen to me. So then what that means from a biological standpoint is that that person has had a reaction to some experience. Once you feel a change in your internal chemistry emotionally and you feel altered, you pay attention to what caused it in your outer environment. The brain takes a picture, and that's called a memory. So then we begin to remember the reasons why we are the way we are because of the past. But if you're still living by that emotion and it's 15 years later, from a biological standpoint, it means you haven't changed. The next point is the survival emotions, the emotions that are derived from the hormones of stress, are very addictive. Anger is addictive. Fear is addictive. Sadness is addictive. Resentment is addictive. Competition is addictive. Frustration is addictive. All of those emotions that are derived from the hormones of stress give the brain and body a rush of energy. So if an addiction is something you can't stop, and you happen to have a friend or a family member who's walking around suffering every single day of their life, and you say to them, why don't you stop? Or you're in the middle of an angry experience, and I say to you, Michael, why don't you just stop being angry? If you can't stop that, then on some level you're addicted, because an addiction is something you can't stop. So when people start to understand, oh my God, I'm addicted to my own frustration, I'm addicted to my own suffering, I'm addicted to my own guilt, all of a sudden they start becoming conscious of what they're doing to their brain and body. Show them how those very chemicals downregulate genes to create disease, and then get them beyond that by doing meditation. That's the moment then all of a sudden they begin to be greater than their biology. And we've measured this thousands of times in people, and it's without a doubt, I can say this from every single cell in my being, that a person is at their absolute best when they get beyond themselves. That's the bottom line. 70% of the time, people are living by the hormones of stress, whether they know it or not. They're always anticipating the future based on the past. They're always having their attention on objects and people and things and places in the world, because that's where the danger is. The chemicals are jacking up their body, so their attention is on their body. So they think, based on their own experience, that they're their body, but they're not. They believe that they're their identity that's connected to relationships of people and things and places in their life, but they're not. Then when people start to live on autopilot and they get out of bed the same way and they brush their teeth with the same hand and they do all the same things every single day, and they've been doing that for 20 or 30 years, for the most part then, their body's on autopilot. It's in a predictable future based on what it's done in the past. So very few people are in the present moment. So then they're locked into a line of time, a linear line of time, where their future and their past seem to be exactly the same. So not a lot of people are present or in the present moment. And if you're not in the present moment, I assert that you're running some type of program, which means you're not present. The body's already programmed to be in the future or in the past. So then in the elegant moment of meditation, and we can predict this now on a brain scan, there comes a moment where a person forgets about their body. They forget, they're so involved in their inner world that there is no body. They forget that they are an identity. They're not paying attention to the people they know and the places they go and the things they have to do or the things they own. They become no one. They become no thing. They go to nowhere, and they forget about their appointments and their past, and they become no time. And that is the moment they become pure consciousness. That is the moment that they begin to disconnect from their biology. And who you are, to answer that question, is a consciousness that's manipulating the brain and body to produce different levels of mind. And only when you are pure consciousness can you begin to change your body. Only when you are beyond your body can you heal your body. The body can't heal the body. You have to get beyond your body to heal your body. In order for you to create some new experience in your life, you got to get beyond the problems in your life. In order for you to create some new future event in some future time, you got to get beyond predictable linear time. And so if you're going to heal your body by thought alone, if you're going to create some experience in your life by thought alone, if you are going to create some new event in your future by thought alone, then you have to become thought alone. And that is the moment when you become pure consciousness, where you are nobody, no one, no thing, no where, and no time. That is the moment that you're no longer constrained by those laws. That is the moment your consciousness, free-willed, subjective human consciousness, merges with the quantum field, the objective universal consciousness. Mm-hmm. And when they come together and you come back to awareness, you take a piece of it with you and you become more like it. You become more willful. It has an amazing will. You become more mindful. It has an infinite mind. You become more conscious. It has a great consciousness. You become more loving. It's a lover of life. You become more giving. It's a giver of life. Its nature becomes your nature. And so teaching people how to do that is the art. So then when you understand that we now know that there's certain ways to do that help people get there faster.
Is there a way to tap into the positive resonance of those around us to help us to heal?
Well, the answer is yes and yes. I think, first of all, people have to understand what coherence is and what incoherence is. I think that for the most part, the hormones of stress, again, living in survival, the moment you begin to become agitated or impatient or judgmental or resentful or frustrated or bitter sad or guilty or whatever, what happens is the primitive nervous system switches on, and you're mobilizing enormous amounts of energy for some threat in your external environment. So you can run from a predator, so you can hide from a predator, so you could fight a predator. And that's really good for the short term. I mean, all organisms in nature can tolerate short-term stress, but the problem is that when you keep turning on that stress response and you can't turn it off, now the body begins to move out of balance, because stress is when your body's knocked out of homeostasis. So when you turn on that stress response and you can't turn it off, now there begins to become some breakdowns in the body. So now you keep racing the heart because of traffic, because of your teenager, because of your finances, but there's no predator back there. But you're turning it on as if you're being chased constantly by some predator. The problem with that is that all of a sudden the heart, that should beat coherently and rhythmically, starts to beat very incoherent. It becomes arrhythmic. It becomes disintegrated. Its rhythm begins to change. At the same time, when you're living by the hormones of stress, the brain gets a rush of adrenaline, it gets an arousal, and the arousal then causes you to pay attention to your body. Pay attention to your environment, pay attention to time, because if you're being chased by a predator, you better be thinking about your body, you better be thinking about where in your environment you're going to run, and you better be thinking about how much time you have to get there. The problem is, again, as you begin to keep firing those chemicals into your brain, and you shift your attention from a person or a problem or a thing or a place or an experience over and over again, each one of those things has neurological networks in their brain. As you begin to shift your attention, you begin to fire all these circuits, and you begin to produce an incoherent brain. So when your brain's incoherent, you're incoherent. When your heart's incoherent, you don't feel good. So then, is it possible then to begin to teach people how to create more coherence in their heart and in their brain? We've measured this thousands and thousands of times. So when you're under stress, you're focusing on matter, you're focusing on objects, you're focusing on things, you're narrowing your focus because the danger is around the corner, and you're paying attention to one thing. Really great for the short term. But if you keep doing that and you keep arousing the brain, you drive the brain into higher brain states, what's called high beta, and now it's like driving your sports car in first gear on the freeway. So then instead of focusing on matter and objects and things and narrowing your focus, if you teach people how to open their focus and sense space instead of matter, energy, and information. When you open your focus, you can't analyze or think, you can't obsess, and brain waves tend to slow down, and not only slow down, but get highly organized and coherent. At the same time, the heart starts to get coherent, and the heart starts to affect the brain starts to affect the heart, and all of a sudden now, when you're living by stress, you're drawing from this invisible vital field of energy and turning it into chemistry, and you're robbing the body's vital energy. So now you're more matter and less energy. You're more particle and less wave, and you can exert very little effects in your life. But then when you begin to free yourself from the chains of those addictive emotions, you begin to open your heart, the field around your body. The heart begins to produce a magnetic field that sometimes can go to 9 meters wide. And if you can teach a person how to feel an elevated emotion and sustain it, and they begin to like drop pebbles in water over and over again, and they start to produce these beautiful waves. If they feel deeply and richly and profoundly, they're dropping big stones that are producing bigger waves. Now those waves are energy, and energy is frequency, and all frequency carries information like radio waves and cell phone waves. What those waves carry is your thought, your intent. So now the carrier of your own vibrational patterns, it begins to carry information that is going to begin to influence matter. So if I'm sitting next to you and you're coherent and I'm coherent, when those two waves come together, they summate and create a bigger amplitude, and that's called a higher energy. That's called constructive interference. If you got 750 people in the room and they're all doing that,
that's rocking.
Watch out. Now, yeah, you're going to see energy go really high in the room. Now, if I'm coherent and you're coherent, but the person sitting next to us is not coherent, if you begin to move grandfather clocks in unison and 20 of them are moving together and one's moving out of rhythm, and we come back tomorrow, that one that's out of rhythm is going to just join and become entrained to the other one. So sooner or later, when we get that effect where there's enough people doing it, everybody starts to become entrained, and now there's a coherent, very, very palpable, measurable. We measured the energy, and the energy in the room is just off the chart. And now we have enough energy in the room for the miraculous and the supernatural to occur.
Automatic writing is perhaps the most cutting-edge tool for connecting with the other side, which is why we've written the definitive guide called the Automatic Writing Experience. To find out more, simply visit automaticwriting.com. It's my favorite way to help you to shine bright. Woohoo!